This is Gemara and Sukkah Daf Tes. So the learning for this month, the month of Av, has been generously sponsored by Eastern Union, Zecher Nesho, Zechasel Shagav and Avram Yehuda, as well as Rachel Bas, Shamshan Aaron Tzvi, and Sham B'Shav and Aliyah. The schos of the entire Chabura should be a tremendous schos l'nishmasam. Of course, all the men mevega chaim and Sham Stephen Reiz Zervas and Andy Devasim as Chaysay Yisrael and the verse the Shalei Shal Mas Nabi Vashe Vavigor Shechan Shmol Ben Dio Dinim and Chan Reizim El Chayv Nili Brachos Tava Musa Dina Idel Bas Shina Mendel Zviv and Vegurin Vechel Sunnah Zelahuva Rivka Bas Vashev and Tzalzim and Chalester B'Soy Shachal Yisrael as well as Chashidach for Yisachayim and Devaira and at Aleah Bas Ita. First of all, once again, I'd like to welcome all the new listeners. Baruch Hashem, we are growing by leaps and bounds. And we should just continue share the share with a friend, whether it's for a chazara, whether it's for the first time. Let's build the excitement. Let's gather some energy as we move forward, as we hopefully go into Tisha B'Av. Also, a little bit of a scheduling. We're going to try to get both Shabbos and Sunday's daf up before Shabbos. Anyone that would like to go into Shabbos and Tisha B'Av, having a clear mind, knowing that their Daf Yomi is taken care of, so that hopefully when Mashiach comes, you don't have to learn the daf on the flight over during Tisha B'Av. Says the Gemara on the top of Tasam and Aleph, Sukkah Yishana. We have an old Sukkah. What is an old Sukkah? Rashi already starts us off and says, we're going to see in the Gemara that it's made 30 days before Yontif. And you did not do it l'shem Yontif, you didn't do it for the sake of Yontif. The Gemara is going to describe that in one moment. Says the Mishnah, Sukkah Yishana Machlokes, Beis Shammai Poislim, Beis Hillel Machshir, Beis Shammai Pasol, Beis Hillel the Mekel says it is kosher. Ve'zei Sukkah Yishana. Says the Mishnah right away, what is a Sukkah Yishana? Kol she'asau koidem lechag shleishim yom. You made it more than 30 days before Yontif. Avol. So what is this Sukkah Yishana that Beis Shammai says is an issue? According to Beis Hillel, it's all kosher. According to Beis Shammai, that the Sukkah Yishana is a problem. What is the Sukkah Yishana, says the Mishnah? Number one, you made it before 30 days. So anything within 30 days automatically is going to be fine. Even Beis Shammai will agree. Number two, if it's before 30 days, that's what Beis Shammai says is a problem. But if you did it l'shem chag, you built it for the sake of sukkahs. You put up your sukkah 10 months early, you did it l'shem chag, it's going to be fine. And as we're going to see in the Gemara right now, what does l'shem chag mean? Of course, as we pointed out all the way back in Daf Beis, it always refers to the schach, al shem aschach kari sukkah. The sukkah comes from the schach. And it's going to be the same thing over here. When did you put on the schach? Was that within 30? Was the schach put on the shem sukkah? Let's see the Gemara right now. Says the Gemara, my taima, the Beis Shammai, where did Beis Shammai get this din? That it has to be a sukkah l'shem sukkah. And therefore, if it's more than 30 days prior to sukkah, and you don't have any intent, it's going to be a problem. Says the Gemara, Markra, it says in the Torah, Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yamim LaHashem. The Chag of Sukkah is the Yontif of Sukkah should be 7 days for Hashem. And this pasuk, Beis Shammai explains, Sukkah Suyul L'Shem Chag. Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yamim LaHashem, that the Sukkah itself should be made L'Shem Chag Be'inan, that the Sukkah has to be created L'Shem Chag, and as the first Rashi speaks out, the Chsev, Sukkah is LaHashem. L'shem mitzvah samelach. We're darshaning the fact that the pasuk calls it a sukkah, and then it says it has to be la Hashem. What does it mean it has to be la Hashem? It means that there has to be specific intent when you create the sukkah for Hashem. That is how Beis Shammai learns his yisoid, his idea, that if you made a sukkah not l'shem Hashem, not for a sukkah, again, more than 30 days before, because everything within 30 days automatically is l'shem chag. Therefore, says Beis Shammai, is a problem. Now, of course, as what we all anticipate, now we have the ping pong match. What does Beis Hillel do with this pasuk? Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel says we need this pasuk of Sukkah, Chag Sukkah Shivas Yom Hashem for the din of Rav Shishas, Damar Rav Shishas, Misham Rav Akiva. Minayin Latzi Sukkah Shasurin Kol Shiva. How do you know that you cannot use the wood of the sukkah? The sukkah itself is also to be used for the entirety of sukkahs. Talmud Leimer says the Torah. Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yamim Hashem. That this Chag HaSukkah, this structure, Shivas Yamim for Hashem. For 7 days it is for God. For 7 days you cannot get any benefit from it. Vitanya. And we learn further on the similar vein. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer says Yehuda ben Beseira, Kisheim Shachal Shem Shemayim Al Chagiga. Just like there's a din is a din that there's a Shem Shamayim. There's a specific entity of a carbon chagiga. Just like the chagiga you can't use for anything else aside for your carbon, so to the walls of the sukkah you cannot use for anything else. The Shem Shamayim, the heavenly name, is chal, it falls and is on the sukkah itself. Shenemar, as the Torah teaches us, Chag HaSukkah Shavas Yom LaHashem, Ma'chag LaHashem, just like the Yom Tov is for Hashem, Av Sukkah LaHashem. So this Bryce of Rav Yehuda concurs with the way Beis Hillel explains the pasuk. Again, the pasuk of Chag HaSukkah Shavas Yom LaHashem, which Beis Shammai says is the source of Makar, to teach us that the sukkah has to be created L'shem Sukkos. Says Beis Hillel, absolutely not. That pasuk is teaching me something totally different. The din of Rav Sheshes, a din similar like Rav Yehuda taught us, that the sukkah itself cannot be used. It's also to use the entity of the sukkah. You can't take the wall and hold it over your head to shield yourself from the rain. You can use the sukkah itself. I'm sorry if that case wasn't normal, but you can use the sukkah itself for a mundane purpose for the entirety of sukkahs. Says the Gemara. So how does Beis Shammai know Rav Sheshes' din? Beis Shammai nami mibayalei lahachi. What does Beis Shammai do? Beis Shammai has to use the pasuk teaches his halacha as well. Beis Shammai agrees that the walls of the sukkah cannot be used for 7 days. Says the Gemara, you are correct. Ein acha nehami. Beis Shammai agrees that we use the pasuk for this other halacha. Elamai time of the Beis Shammai. So now we go back to square one. Why did Beis Shammai hold in the Mishnah? That is a din lishma. That if you build your sukkah more than 30 days before Yantif, if you do not do it for specific intent for Yantif, it's going to be a problem. Ksiv Kara Achrina says the Gemara Beis Shammai has a different pasuk. The pasuk in Devarim teaches us Chag HaSukkah Tasa L'cha. The Yantiv of Sukkot should be L'cha, for yourself. Shivas Yamim, for 7 days. And from here, Beis Shammai learns Sukkah Suya L'Shem Chag B'Yinon, that the sukkah itself has to be created L'Shem, for the sake of Yantif. As the pasuk says Chag HaSukkah Tasa L'cha, that the sukkah has to be for you. There has to be an intent. There has to be a specific Lishma put into the sukkah, says Beis Shammai. So this is again the second Makar for Beis Shammai. The first Makar was Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yom LaHashem, which the Gemara refutes and proves that we need it for a different halacha, the halacha of Rav Sheshes, the Bryce of Rav Yehuda, that the wall of the sukkah itself cannot be used for mundane purposes. So where does Beis Shammai know his halacha that you have to have lishma? Says the Gemara, Chag HaSukkah Tasa L'cha. So now what does Beis Hillel do with this pasuk? Beis Hillel, what do they do with this pasuk? La'oisin sukkah b'choyle shal ma'id. A totally different halacha. Says Beis Hillel, are you allowed to build your sukkah on chol ha'mayid? Says Beis Hillel, yes. You know, I know that from this pasuk, because this pasuk teaches me that for Shivas Yamim, that for any of the 7 days you got to build your sukkah. Chag HaSukkah is Tasalacha. You could create the sukkah when Shivas Yamim. Says Beis Hillel, that's what this pasuk teaches me, that you are allowed to build your sukkah even on Chol HaMayid. Beis Shammai Svirulu, what does Beis Shammai do with this halacha? Rav Elazar. Beis Shammai holds like Rav Eliezer, that holds as follows: Damar Einaisin Sukkah b'Chol HaMayid. You're not allowed to make your sukkah Chol HaMayid, and that's why Beis Shammai does not need this pasuk, because he disagrees. He says you're not allowed to build your sukkah on Chol HaMayid. But now the Gemara says, okay, but that din of Rav Yehuda, you can't build your sukkah on Chol HaMayid. Beis Hillel, lastly, Rav Yehuda. Beis Hillel argues. Amar Rav, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Psula minatzitzin sheira. Says the Gemara, let's go a little bit further into halacha. The din of lishma, the din of doing a mitzvah l'shem for the specific purpose. Based on what we just said, Beis Hillel leslu Rav Yehuda. It sounds like Beis Hillel does not hold to this din of Rav Yehuda. Ask the Gemara, is that accurate? Rav Yehuda Marav, excuse me. Who's Rav Yehuda Marav? Rav Yehuda Marav, what did he teach us? If you make tzitzis, either from the kaitzin, that which is left over at the end of the thread, the thorn-like areas, you did it from the embroidered threads, you did it from the fringes, different parts of the threads and the strands that are left over at the end of the loom. What is the halacha psula? But if you made it from the weaving threads, then it's going to be kosher. I understand that's a little bit difficult with mitzias. We don't necessarily know what this means. Let's let the Gemara develop itself and explain exactly what's going on. They came in front of Shmuel. Amar li, av min hatzitzin ami psula. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel taught me even from the tzitzin So these balls of the thread are also possible. So now, what was the purpose of this whole brisa? Says the Gemara, Alma, what do we see for this brisa? Tibi'inan tviya lishma. You have to spin the threads of the tzitzis for lishma. And we'll speak of one halach of tzitzis in one moment. Let's just continue the Gemara. Hachanami, says the Gemara, this is the kasha. Hachanami nibai sukkah suya lishma. You also need a sukkah, has to be lishma. So what's the problem? It sounds like both Rav and Shmuel are disagreeing with Beis Hillel. What's going on over here? Because Beis Hillel seemingly said it does not have to be for the sake of the mitzvah. And we just quoted a brisa, Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, he said b'shem Shmuel, that when it comes to tzitzis, it has to be done for the sake of the mitzvah. But in our Mishnah by Sukkah, what did Beis Hillel teach me? It does not have to be done for the sake of the Sukkah. So what's going on? Is Rav and Shmuel holding like Beis Shammai? That is the kasha of the Gemara. Again, one more time. In our Mishnah, it said the Beis Hillel do you not have to do lishma. Beis Shammai said you have to do lishma. We quoted a brisa about tzitzis, different areas of the tzitzis, the threads, the thorn-like areas, the weaves, different areas. But the take-home point is both Rav and Shmuel are holding to be on tvia lishma. You have to spin it lishma. That's like Beis Shammai. Answers the Gemara. 5 lines from the bottom. There's a specific halacha by tzitzis that says gedilim tasa lecha. That the strands, the off-growths, the strands referring to the tzitzis should be lecha. Lecha l'shem chayvecha. Should be specifically for your chiyah, for the tzitzis, and that's the reason why when it comes to tzitzis, there's a din of tviyah spin lishma, but not necessarily are we going with Beis Shammai, because it's a special din by tzitzis. Says the Gemara, really? It says the same thing by sukkahs licha. So what are you saying? Lecha l'shem chayvecha. Answers the Gemara, we know we need that for the mute gezula. A different halacha, that by a sukkah you can't steal a sukkah. That's what it's teaching me. Says the Gemara, 1 second. So say the same thing by tzitzis. Say it's not coming to teach me the din of lishma. Say it's coming to teach me to exclude gezula. Answers the Gemara, also kisiv krachrina vasu lahem mishel lahem. And therefore we have a different pasuk teaching me that point. Therefore, we do not need this pasuk to teach me that it has to be not gezula, it's to be special lishma, but it's not necessarily only going with the opinion of Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai could hold. Because both Rav and Shmuel could hold like Beis Hillel with regard to sukkah. It's just a din about tzitzis. Let's just speak out one halacha. We see over here that the Gemara seemingly concludes that everyone holds has to be tviyah lishma, and that is the halacha. There's a different discussion brought down in the Ramah, brought down in the Mishnah Berurah, which says the nice chomra, kedai chomra to do is the niputz lishma, is the combing. When you take the wool, the kain off of the animal, does that also have to be lishma? The niputz, the pulling it off the animal, that's a machlekes. That is something that the Mishnah Berurah says is a kedai chomra. It's a nice thing to do. You know, they do sell in the stores. It's a few extra dollars, but tviyah lishma, as we see over here, everyone agrees, lecha, the tzitzis have to be for you, gedilim ta'asa lecha, special din of lishma by tzitzis. Now we turn over Tam and Beis. Anyone that was getting nervous that we just went 13 minutes without a picture, that's a long stretch. Don't have no fear. We're going to have some fabulous pictures in Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah, he says, Sukkah soy tachas soy ilan. You make your sukkah underneath a tree. What's the halacha? We flipped over to Amud Beis. I'm sorry if I did not say that. But says the Mishnah, you make the sukkah under a tree. It's as if you made it inside your house. It's no good. Sukkah al gabe sukkah. Let's see if one sukkah on top of another. Al yoni kasher v'tachtayna psula. Rav Yehuda remain diura b'al tachtayna kasher. If you can't live in the top one, then the bottom one is kosher. So 2 halves of the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah discussions like we see in front of you a beautiful sukkah tachas ilan, and the Mishnah says it is possible. The second part of the Mishnah deals with one sukkah on top of the next sukkah, which we're going to see in the Gemara is really not as simple as we're making it out to be. There's going to be different qualifications and scenarios within this case, but this is where the Mishnah said that if you made the sukkah al gabi sukkah, the top one is kosher, the bottom one is possible, or if you this is something to do if you could live in the top one, and Amir Hashem, we're going to see that in the Gemara in one moment. Says the Gemara, Omar Rava. First, we're going to deal with the first part of the Mishnah, the Sukkah under a tree, and then we'll deal with the second part of the Mishnah, Sukkah under a Sukkah. We're familiar with this dak from Daf Beis, that the critical ingredient of Succah of a Sukkah is that it has to be more shade than sun. And any time it's more sun than shade, it's as if it's null, it's not there at all. So says the Gemara that when the Mishnah said that the tree will invalidate you, it's not if you have one twig. It's only if the tree is giving you more shade than sun. If there's more sun than the shade kshira, it's going to be kosher. Mimai, how do I know that? Why did the Mishnah elaborate and speak out that if you make your sukkah under a tree, it's as if it's in your house? Shkoyach, just say puzzle. Why telling me it's as if it's in my house? Lomali, why do we need that phrase? Lemisni, says the Gemara, Kilu asab zachabayis, let's leave psula. Ela kamashlan, you know what the Mishnah is teaching us? The ilan tabi and the bayis. The tree is like a house. Of course, your ceiling gives off more shade than sun. So only is going to passel in the Mishnah if this tree is giving off more shade than sun. Asks the Gemara, is this accurate? What is Allah going to be? It sounds like that if there's not that many branches, it's kosher. Why, says the Gemara? Those few branches, are those branches kosher? Of course not. They're mechubar lekarka, they're attached to the ground. One of the basic tenets of the Succah has to be that it's detached from the ground, like we're going to see at the end of the day and tomorrow. So says the Gemara, what does it help? Very good if it's not as much shade and sun. Very good that it's not good Succah. But then those few branches should make the Sukkah a problem. Amar Rabba, says Rabba, you know what the case is? Bishechavtan. The case is that you took the tree branches, you lowered them, and you mixed them together with the Succah. You mixed them together with your Succah. And therefore what? Says Rashi, very, very famously. Rashi is about 8 lines into the narrow lines. Rashi says, B'shachavtan, hishvel anav of lemata me'urav v'nim Succah kasher. You mix together the tree with the Succah. We'll see a picture in a moment. Ve'nirin ben, u'Succah kasher, rab alav. There's more Succah kasher. Umevatla, and it makes the Succah puzzle bittul. It's as if it's not there. Timidaraisa komili batal beroiv. And that's how Rashi says the mechanics of how this is going to work is with bittul, the kosher Succah overwhelms the not kosher Succah. We'll just point out the obvious question that is bothering everyone right now is we never say bittul when something is nicker. Bittul is only by the basic definition has to be that it's mixed together, then it can be bittul. If inside my cup right now I have one fly that falls in, it's true that the overwhelming liquid, okay, forget about if it's liquids with solids. Let's say a dot of blood falls in, and I see the blood, it's bad, I can see it. It's never going to be batul because you can see the entity. So why here does Rashi say batul? A big question amongst the Mefarshim. Let's leave that. But says the Gemara, what did Rav Papa just answer? B'shachavtan, you mixed it together. Asks the Gemara, b'shachavtan, ma'ila memra. What's the chiddush? It's pashit. Maybe we should make a gzeira, and we should say it's possible even when you mix together Succah, because you might forget to do it a different time. Kamash landaloi guys rinon. The chiddush of Rav Papa, the chiddush of our Mishnah is that when you take the tree, you bring it down, you mix it together. We'll see a picture in a moment. It's batal. It chiddush is we do not make a gzeira in a different case that you might forget. Says the Gemara, we already knew this as well. If you put on top of your sukkah, you put vines, you put gourds, you put different types of growths, and then you put Succah on top of it is psula. What's the case? If the case is that you just took the branches and you just stuck it on top, of course it's possible. You're not doing anything. What's the brayso talking about? We have a specific and explicit brayso that the brayso says if you take other Succah, you mix it together. It must be a case that you mix it together. And yet the brayso says it's kosher. The brayso must be teaching me we don't make this gezerah. So the theme of the chiddush of our Mishnah is, I would have thought on immediately b'diavad. Maybe the brayso we quoted was idolas again, you already did it, and it's just telling me that b'diavad it's going to be kosher. But maybe lechatchila it would not work to do that. Therefore, our Mishnah teaches me that even lechatchila you're allowed to mix the branches as long as it's more kosher Succah than pasul Succah. Now let's review the Gemara we just saw through some beautiful pictures. Said the Gemara at first glance that in the Mishnah, if there's more sun from shade coming from that tree on top, it's not going to be a problem. Ask the Gemara, what's the reason? How come it's tarif schach pasul and schach kasher? What, when you look up in your sukkah, what do you have? You have good schach and not good schach, so it should be pasul. Answers the Gemara, then you take the schach pasul, you interweave it, you weave it, you mix it together with schach kasher. It's batal, says Rashi, and that's the reason why it's going to work. Says the Gemara, we already knew this from our Brisa. The Brisa said, Hidl es a geffen, that if you take the vines, you take other foliage, and you mix it together with your schach, it's going to be kosher. A similar case, the case must be that you mix it together, and with that is the Gemara's chiddush, that by us, the chiddush is that you can even do this, lechat chila. And now we move on. That was part number 1 of the Mishnah, building your sukkah under the tree. The chiddush of the Mishnah, it's only when it's more shade than sun. If there's more sun than shade, it does not passel. Why does it not passel? It should be a case of having 2 different schachs. You have the tree schach and your regular schach. 2 different schachs should passel, says the Gemara Papa. The case is b'shechaf, then you mix the schach together, therefore it's batal. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Now we move on to part 2 of the Mishnah with the remaining few minutes that we have for today. Sukkah al gabe sukkah. Testament of Beis, about 15 lines to the bottom, the 2 dots, we said a case. You have one sukkah on top of the next, and the Mishnah said one statement. The Mishnah said there's going to be a case where one is kosher and one is pasul, and then we qualified that has to do with how strong the floor is, and we'll see this all right now. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara quoting Ebraisa. Ba'asukkah is teishvu. You have to live in a sukkah. V'loi. But sukkah excuse me. Live in a sukkah, but not in a sukkah underneath a sukkah. V'loi b'sukkah shetach seilan. Not in a sukkah under a tree. V'loi b'sukkah sheb'seich habayis. And not in a sukkah within your house. So says the Raisa, 3 different cases you're not allowed to have a sukkah under a sukkah, under a tree, inside a house, because basukos in the plural, that it's not allowed to be, basukos in the singular, that was the kasha, basukos in the singular and not a sukkah in a sukkah. Asks the Gemara, like I just spoke out, basukos tarti mashma, it's plural. It's mashma that there's 2, so maybe it should be the exact opposite. It should teach us that you can, yes, have a sukkah under a sukkah. Amar Am Nachman bar Yitzchak basukos ksiv, it says without the vav, which of course this reminds us of the Gemara of the other day, Yishem Lemikra, Yishem Lemesayres. It's written one way, it's read another way, but that is the teretz of the Gemara. Omar Rav Yirmiyah, comes like Rav Yirmiyah explaining our Mishnah. Pa'amim sheshtem ksheros, pa'amim sheshtem psulos, pa'amim shetachtonik ksheira v'elyonim psula, pa'amim shetachtonik psula v'elyonim ksheira. Says Rav Yirmiyah, in this case, when you have 2 sukkahs, one on top of another, there are times that they're both kosher, there are times that they're both pasul, there are times the top is kosher, time that the bottom is pasul. 4 permutations, says Rav Yirmiyah, and let's figure out exactly the cases that he is discussing. Says the Gemara, Pa'amim, or 7 lines from the bottom. Pa'amim shein ksheros, what is the case that they're both kosher? Hechidami kigoin. The bottom one has more sun than shade, meaning the bottom one as an entity by itself would not be a good sukkah, but then the top sukkah comes along and makes it kosher. And everything is within 20 amos, and therefore the top sukkah comes along and makes the bottom sukkah kosher. Because the bottom sukkah by itself would not be okay, but the top sukkah adds on extra schach. Why is it considered adding on? Because they're all within 20 amos, and therefore the 2 of them together, they're both going to be kosher sukkahs. Case number 1 of Rav Yirmiyah. Case number 2, Pam Sheshtem Psulais. What is that case? Echidami. They both have too much, they both have a lot of shade. So the bottom one should be a good sukkah unto itself. The top one should be a good sukkah unto itself. But yet they're both possible. Why? So the top one is more than 20 amos. So we know why the top one's possible, because it's more than 20 amos. But then once the top one becomes possible, you know what happens? And then it makes the bottom one possible. Because then it's called possible schach on top of my kosher schach. So the top one makes my bottom one possible. Case number 2. And of course we'll review with the pictures in a moment. Case number 3 of Rav Yirmiyah. What's the case that the bottom one is kosher moving over to Yudam So the bottom one has enough schach, everything's good. Vel yaina, the top one, chamos mitzilas, does not have enough schach. So the top one is possible. But if the top one is possible, we just said a moment ago that it should, in fact, and make the bottom one possible. You know why it does not? The top one has not enough schach, but it doesn't have puzzle schach because it's within 20 amos. So that schach will not infect the bottom. The bottom has enough schach onto its own, and for the bottom will be kasher, the top will be puzzle. And the final case, the top one is kasher chidami. Ki going to teravayus lasim b'chamas. They both have enough shade, so they both should be kasher. So why is the bottom one possible? And the top one is within 20, so the top one is going to be kasher, and thereby it's going to make that. Unfortunately, is going to passel up the bottom one. Let's see the pictures for one moment. This is the case that they're both kasher, everything is within 20, they both have not enough schach, so the top schach comes and helps out the bottom schach. This is case number 2, the top one is puzzle because it's more than 20. The bottom one is puzzle because it has enough schach. And there, it actually doesn't make a difference because the top one schach is schach psula, and it comes and therefore goes down and puzzles up the bottom one. I'll just point out very quickly, as you see in this picture, how do you gauge how tall the top sukkah is? By the floor of the top sukkah, not from the floor on the bottom. This is like if you're on a porch, you're on the 3rd floor of a building and you have a porch. Do we say, wait, your sukkah is automatically puzzled? It's a mal. They ask him, no, it goes by the floor that it's sitting on. Case number 3 was the top one is puzzled, the bottom one is kasher. And the case was that the bottom one has enough schach, so everything is good. The top one does not have enough schach, but because it's within 20, it does not infect it. And the final case is that the top one is going to be kasher, and the bottom one is going to be puzzle. The reason is going to be they both have enough schach. And the reason that the top one is going to infect the bottom one is because it's going to be within 20. We ran out of time. Let's just see one Rashi in this last case. I'm going to call it a day. The final case, the Gemara said, this chach, says Rashi is about 13 lines into the narrow lines. This chach shall yoyna lav schachu v'loy mifsla tachtaina mishom sukkah achas. Excuse me, Misham Succah Tachas Succah. Those are the critical words. The reason it's going to basla because since the top Succah is a kosher Succah, it's going to go down and make the bottom one basla because you're not allowed to have a Succah under a Succah, like we learned to the Xeris Hakasav, the pasuk on Amud Beis. Valyonim Psulam Misham Dechamas Murim B'Silasak Yong Dekaim Tervai B'Sachaf. Laritz. The Elyoin Lamala Me'asrim Aftachtenim Psula Misham Demisar B'Sach Puzzle about the kosher Shav Zach Lamala Me'asrim Psula Al Kikai B'Sachaf Let's start Bilvad Shli Salas Murim B'Chamasa. Okay, we're going to pick up this again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go a dot further into these cases, and then we'll move on.